Alright, this is take 2 on dividing decimals. Anyway, when we're going to set up a division problem, the numerator of a fraction, or what we call the top number, that ends up being the dividend, or number inside the division house. And it gets divided by the denominator of a fraction, or what we call the divisor, placed to the outside left of the division house. You can see my example here. I'm going to move this up a little. We've got the example of 2/3. So you can envision this kind of tipping over. The 2 falls in the house, the 3 stays outside. And the 2 is a whole number here. So where does the decimal go? It goes to the bottom right. And then once you get it set up, this is a little arrow here, but you make sure you place the decimal for your answer straight up above your decimal in the problem. Okay, so now you'll say to yourself, can 3 go into 2? No, it cannot. So put a 0 right above what it can't go into. Now, we can add what we call add-in zeros, and you can add as many as you want, because as long as you're adding zeros beyond the decimal, it doesn't change the value of 2. Okay, so now we can work this problem. Now we say it can't go into 2, so can it go into 2 with the 0, which is 20? Well, yes, it can. It can go into it 6 times. So 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract that. And I'm going to have to borrow here, make that a 1. 8 from 10 is 2. Then we bring down the next 0. And can 3 go into 20? Well, notice we've got a repeat here. Well, yes, it can. It can go in 6 times. But we see that it's repeating, so we can just put the little repeating bar. That means it's a repeating decimal on the top of it. Okay, so when the divisor has a decimal, you're going to move the decimal to the right enough to create a whole number and count the number of digit moves you're making. Then move the decimal for the dividend, that's the inside number, the same number of digit spaces. So what in the world am I talking about? Well, let's look at some examples so I can explain that. Example 1. Okay, I've got 2.2 dividing into 7.502, or in other words, 7.502 divided by 2.2. That's how you could read that. Let's make this number a whole number. Okay, and however many digit moves you need for your decimal to make the outside number a whole number, or the divisor, you move your dividend number that same number of spaces. Now, make your decimal go straight up from there. We've got 22 into 75. How many times will 22 go into 75? Well, I think it'll go about 3 times. And that is 66. 3 times 22 is 66. We subtract that, and we borrow from this. 6 from 15 is 9. And so now we'll bring down our 0. And how many times can 22 go into 90? Well, I think that would be 4 times. And so 4 times 22 would be 88. And I'm going to borrow here. 8 from 10 is 2. Bring down my 2. And 22 will go into 22 1 time with no remainder. So I'm done with that example. Now, I've actually included more than one example here because of different problems I've seen in the math class and common mistakes that students make. So first of all, let's go ahead and add a decimal here. Add some add-in zeros. Doesn't matter how many. And then let's do our decimal move like we talked about. This time we have 2 decimal moves. So we move this 2 times and make that go straight up. And so let's see. 64 is what we're dealing with now into 1,300. And so 64 can't go into 13, but it can go into 130. Well, it can go into 130 2 times. And 4 times 2 is 8. 6 times 2 is 12. So I'm subtracting 128 from 130. 8 from 10 is 2. Okay, so I'll bring down this 0. Oh, well, 64 cannot go into 20. Well, that's the problem I've seen students have, is when it can't go into 20, they'll bring down another 0, but they'll forget if it can't go into the 20, a 0 must be added here in this place value. Okay, so now, can 64 go into 200? Well, yes it can. It can go in 3 times. And 64 into that 3 times. 3 times 64 is 192. Subtract that, and of course we've got to borrow here. Make that a 10, but borrow, make it a 9. And so we have 8 remainder. And we'll bring down our 0, and it can go into that 1 time. And our left 4 from 10 is 6, 6 from 7 is 1, and we bring down another 0. 64 into 160 is, well, it'll go into that 2 times, which is 128. Okay, now hold on a minute. Let's go back to my directions at the top that I ignored in the beginning. Round to the hundredths place. Well, where's the hundredths place? The hundredths place is the 1 right there. That's your hundredths place. So I don't have to keep going as long as I have my thousandths place filled in, because the thousandths place will determine how to round that. And remember the little rule, 4 or less, let that number rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So your wavy equals means I've got a rounded number or an approximate number. So this is approximately 20.31. We're going to let that number rest. And 5 or more, you raise the score. So anyway, there we go. That one's done. Now let's look at another example. I've got a decimal outside the house, a whole number inside. Okay, so I'll put my decimal here. This gets moved once. This gets moved once. So you've got to fill in that move with a 0. Bring your decimal straight up. And I think I did that on the other one, but I just want to emphasize when you've got a whole number that your decimal moves get filled in with a 0. 3 can go into 20. How many times? It can go in 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I get remainder 2 again, because 8 from 10 is 2. Add some add-in zeros. Bring that down. And notice I'm getting a repeater already. 3 into 20 is 6. 18. Now I wanted to have this be my last example, because when you have a repeater with a whole number and the whole number is the same number as the repeater, it's not technically correct to put your repeater over the whole number. You always at least fill in the 10th spot and put your repeater over that, indicating that this repeats forever. Okay, and I hope this is helping you with how to divide decimals. Thank you very much. Bye.